A woman was exploring an abandoned cabin when she decided to take a photo inside the attic. At the time, nothing seemed unusual, but later, when she looked back at the image, she noticed something. Near a bench, a faint figure, shaped almost like a person sitting down. It wasn't something she had seen while taking the photo. So was this just a trick of the eye, or something more mysterious tied to the history of that abandoned cabin? A Reddit user known as Beefstick Sub was spending the night in a remote mountain cabin. After finishing a Dungeons and Dragons session late at night, he noticed something unusual. Faint music coming from somewhere in the distance. The same melody looping over and over again. He mentioned there was a few houses in the area, but none close enough for the music to sound this loud or clear. Curious but uneasy, he stepped outside, but there was no clear source. No lights, no sign of anyone nearby, just the music, echoing through the woods. The experience left him unsettled, wondering who, or what, was out there in the darkness. A Reddit user known as HealthBright555 shared a story after their son installed a motion detecting camera in his bedroom. At first it was just for fun, but one night around 1 a.m. the camera captured something unexpected. A strange figure standing inside the room. The family was immediately concerned, but the situation took a turn when the uploader shared an update. After checking the system, they realized the timestamp might have been incorrect. Once they updated the software, the time shifted closer to 8 p.m., which made a much simpler explanation possible. It could have been his sister in the room. Still, the way the figure appeared on camera left some uncertainty behind. So let's hope it really was just a simple mix-up with the timestamp. TikToker Annie Michaela was home alone around 2 a.m. when this happened. Someone was moving around the exterior of the home, approaching different entry points. Doors were knocked on repeatedly, and the doorbell rang multiple times. The behavior continued without any clear purpose, and no explanation was given for why someone would be at the property at that hour, especially since the area is quite remote. Inside, the TikToker remained on high alert, unsure whether it was someone lost and disoriented or a real intruder. How the situation unfolded is unknown. A man began experiencing strange disturbances in his cabin late at night. It started with a low vibrating sound, strong enough to wake him from sleep. Confused, he checked the house, but everything seemed normal. As he was heading back to bed, something outside caught his attention: the shed door. It was slightly open, then slowly closed, as if something had just moved inside. Thinking it could be an intruder, he went outside immediately, but when he checked, there was nothing there. Wanting answers, he set up a camera facing the shed. Later, reviewing the footage, he saw the door opening and closing on its own. No one entering, no one leaving. And the vibrations continued, returning at random times with no clear source. Then, one night, when the sound started again, he rushed outside. And this time, he saw something. A tall, dark figure standing beside the shed. Terrified, the man backed away and returned inside. But who, or what, was moving around his property at night? A group of friends went on holiday to a cabin in the woods. During dinner, one of them set up a camera on a timer to take a group photo. When the first attempt didn't flash properly, he took a second one. At the time, nothing seemed unusual. But later, when they looked at the photos, something stood out. In the first image, right in the center of the table, there appeared to be a figure. It looked like a person, positioned directly between the group, but it didn't match anyone who was there. Then, in the second photo, it was gone. So what appeared in that first image? Redditor Runs with Scissors shared a video taken at his brother-in-law's house. In the footage, the front porch gate suddenly opens by itself. The user explains the gate is latched, so you have to unlock the latch in order to open it. It couldn't just be wind or a small animal. Then the swing begins moving on its own, swaying back and forth despite the still surroundings. There's no obvious explanation, but it almost looked like something just wanted to sit there and swing for a while. But it makes you wonder. A ghost wouldn't need to open a gate to enter, right? On a quiet morning inside a home in Aspen, West End, TikTok user Aspen Meg noticed movement right in front of his main door and started recording. Sitting just outside was a mountain lion. After a few seconds, it simply observed the area. Then it rose from its seated position and slowly turned away from the door. The clip gained attention because sightings like this near residential areas are rare, especially at such close range. What would you do if you encountered such a situation? A photo shared on Facebook by user Paisin Haja was taken during a trip near Gladwin and Seckard Lake. Two women posed together for a photo, but in the space between them, something stood out. A third face appeared in the gap between their heads and shoulders. According to the post, the woman in the image didn't realize it until it was pointed out later. They were sure no one was behind them, and they didn't recognize this person. But I think we can all agree this isn't just a case of pareidolia. It is clearly a face. But whose? A man named Isaac moved into his family's old home, a secluded property with a long and unsettling history. On the surface it looked ordinary, but one place always felt wrong to him: the shed in the backyard. Long before Isaac lived there, the original owner, a war veteran, was said to suffer severe PTSD. He would avoid the shed entirely, claiming something was inside it, moving, watching, waiting. Years later, Isaac began experiencing the same unease. From his window, he sometimes saw movement inside the shed. At night, he heard banging coming from within. While recording a video to answer viewers' questions about the house, something happened.
So, I'll answer the first question. What happened to the video? Y'all hear that, right? Like that. Y'all see that?
The shed door slowly opened on its own, even though he was alone. Maybe the original owner wasn't losing his mind after all. Maybe he was telling the truth all along. A woman was at a cabin one night, trying to sleep, when something outside her patio door caught her attention. She picked up her phone and began recording, confused by what she was seeing. Something appeared to be standing just beyond the glass. Some believe it could just be an animal. Others think the shape and stillness feel unusual, almost like something watching rather than passing by. She was too scared to even move, so she stayed inside until it was gone, and later called her friends. TikTok user Guaga Peach shared an unsettling clip after her cat seemed to notice something outside their window late at night. In the darkness, a pair of bright eyes appears. The cat stares directly at the window, completely focused, with a tense posture and forward-facing ears, as if reacting to something outside that can't be heard. It could be wildlife. Animals like deer, raccoons, owls, or possums can produce strong eye shine under infrared or nearby lighting. Still, it seems larger and moves differently. But what is it? A homeowner was woken up around 3 a.m. by a loud howling coming from outside. Too afraid to check, she waited until morning to review her security camera footage. What it captured was unsettling. Perched on the side of her home was a pale-headed figure with what appeared to be glowing eyes. The woman believed it could be something from local folklore, often referred to as a skinwalker, said to mimic animal sounds or even human voices. But could this truly have been a skinwalker? Reddit user Relationship Next 9923 was at their home in their cabin when they noticed something in their backyard. The swing was moving on its own, way too hard. The air was still, with no wind, and not many people living nearby. No one seemed to be outside either. The user pointed out how aggressive the movement looked, almost too strong to be random. He's still unsure what started the motion. A night in December 1980 in rural Minnesota, 19-year-old Jean Hilliard lost control of her car on an icy road near Lengby. After the crash, she attempted to walk through the freezing darkness to get help, but collapsed just a short distance from her friend's house after spending hours in sub-zero temperatures around negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. She lay unconscious in the snow overnight and was found the next morning in the yard, extremely cold and rigid from the freezing conditions. At the hospital, doctors initially struggled to believe she was alive due to how stiff and frozen her body appeared on the outside, though she still had signs of life. She was carefully warmed in a controlled medical environment, and over time she began to regain consciousness, to the shock of the staff treating her. Despite the extreme exposure, she survived with surprisingly limited long-term damage and eventually recovered, becoming one of the most well-known extreme hypothermia survival cases in medical history. How was that even possible? A Reddit user named witty username 0708 was exploring behind their father's farmhouse in a remote rural area when they came across something unexpected in the woods behind the property. They found a single doll placed in the open. The house itself was built in the 1870s and sits completely isolated, surrounded by dense forest and farmland that has been in the family for decades. The user claimed they never had dolls as a child, making the discovery feel even more unsettling. The doll's face paint appeared unusually intact, as if it hadn't been lying there for long. What was that doll doing behind the farmhouse? Who put it there? And when? A cabin owner got a motion alert from their surveillance camera in the middle of the night, but when they opened the app, they saw something unsettling in their yard. A figure shaped like a young woman wearing a white dress seemed to be walking outside. She was moving slowly across the yard and heading toward the edge of the property. What makes the footage more unsettling is the way she appears under night vision. She looks slightly translucent, not fully solid like a normal person, yet still clearly visible. The cabin owner was surprised, as they lived in a quiet area with very few visitors, especially at night. They went outside to check, but found nothing that could explain a possible intruder. Was it a ghost? A motion-activated camera inside a home was triggered at 4:45 a.m. while everyone inside was asleep. What it captured was later shared by TikTok user These Haunted Hills. In the image, a shadow-like figure appears near a sleeping person. Its shape is humanoid, but without any clear facial features, standing out as something more defined than a simple shadow or lighting effect. One detail that stood out was a sleeper's raised arm, which some believe may have triggered the motion sensor. Some suggest camera glitches, infrared distortion, or low-light artifacts. But others point to sleep paralysis, a phenomenon where people experience vivid hallucinations upon waking, often involving shadowy figures near the bed. In June 2005, two lifelong friends, David Horsey and Frederick Hardesty, traveled to a small cabin in Naani National Park in the Northwest Territories, visiting a friend named Rod Gunderson. Both David and Frederick were experienced outdoorsmen from the nearby community of Fort Simpson and were very familiar with the rugged northern landscape. But something went terribly wrong. On June 16th, Rod returned to the cabin and noticed something unusual. The two men were gone. Inside the cabin, most of their belongings were still there. Food remained stocked, firewood was stacked nearby, and even their firearms had been left behind. There were small signs that fires had been burning nearby, but nothing clearly explained where the men had gone. Concern quickly spread, and on June 18th, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched a search of the surrounding wilderness. Teams combed the forests and riverbanks around the cabin. But after several days of searching, the official operation was called off on June 23rd, leaving family members and volunteers to continue looking on their own. Then, a few days later, the mystery deepened. On June 27th, David Horsey's body was discovered about 2.3 miles from the cabin. Investigators reported burns on his hands and arms, and his death was later attributed to hypothermia. But the story didn't end there. Nearly 2 weeks later, on July 8th, Frederick Hardesty's body was found floating in the North Naani River, more than 12 miles from the cabin. The discovery raised new questions, especially since that stretch of river had reportedly been searched earlier. Autopsies concluded that Frederick had drowned. Many people close to the men were not convinced the investigation had uncovered the full story. Family members and local First Nation communities raised concerns about how the case had been handled. Some witnesses even reported seeing gunshot marks on the cabin floor and damage to clothing that resembled a shotgun blast. These details fueled speculation that something more sinister may have happened before the men had died, but no definitive evidence was ever found to confirm those suspicions. To this day, the deaths of David Horsey and Frederick Hardesty remain one of the most unsettling mysteries connected to Naani National Park. A family from England travelled to Cornwall in the 1960s and stayed in an 18th century cottage after their usual rental was unavailable. From the first night, something felt wrong. The children heard breathing in their room and refused to go upstairs. Even the adults felt it. The house stayed unnaturally still. Locals later shared a story. A farmer who once lived there had murdered his wife and taken his own life. The tree where it happened was still in the garden. At night, sounds came from the same corner of the bedroom. One night, a loud crash woke them, followed by a woman's voice speaking from behind the bed. Decades later, in 2020, a relative returned to the same cottage. At exactly 3 a.m., the same crash came from the corner. Moments later, while reviewing photos taken during the trip, they noticed something in a kitchen window. A large dark silhouette standing inside the house. One thing was for sure. Something was haunting that cottage. A carpenter renovating an old house discovered a handwritten note inside the structure. According to Reddit user HeadspinEXE, the note was dated 1975 and appeared to have been left behind during construction or repairs. It felt like a small time capsule moment, the kind where people unintentionally leave traces of their lives sealed inside walls for decades. It's crazy to think that this 14-year-old would now be 65 years old. A woman standing on the porch of her cabin in the Appalachian Mountains heard something strange one morning. The cry of a baby coming from deep within the woods. She was completely alone. Quickly she took out her phone and began recording, slowly panning toward the tree line, but there was nothing there. No movement, no figure, nothing between the trees. The Appalachians are known for strange sounds like this, noises that seem human, but have no visible source. In reality, certain animals like foxes, bobcats, or even birds can produce cries that closely resemble a baby, especially when echoed through dense forest. Still, hearing something like that when you know you're alone is enough to make anyone uneasy. A Reddit user known as AussieNutsYT shared a short clip after his camera detected something unusual outside his cabin. The footage showed a strange mist-like shape moving slowly through his backyard. It didn't seem solid, almost drifting, before fading out of view. The man who uploaded the clip didn't believe it was anything paranormal. Instead, he suggested it could be a light reflection or a natural camera artifact. Still, the way it moved and how briefly it appeared left some uncertainty behind. In October 2019, 47-year-old Adrienne Ada Quintal was staying alone at her family's cabin near Honor, Michigan. In the early hours of October 17th, she made a frantic phone call to a friend. It was 2:34 a.m., and during the call, Ada claimed that someone was outside the cabin and that she had fired a gun at them. Alarmed, the friend contacted the police. When officers arrived at the remote cabin on Indian Hill Road, they discovered a strange and confusing scene. Ada was gone. Her boots and cell phone had been thrown onto the roof of the cabin, and her 9mm handgun was found lying on the ground outside. Investigators also found multiple bullet holes in the cabin's windows and ceiling, but all the shots appeared to have been fired from inside the cabin. Despite Ada's claim during the phone call, there was no blood, and no sign that anyone else had been injured or even present. Search teams quickly launched a massive effort around the wooded property. Tracking dogs, drones, helicopters, and thermal cameras were used to comb the surrounding forests and swamps. But the terrain around the cabin was thick, flooded, and extremely difficult to search. Weeks passed with no signs of her. Then, nearly 10 weeks later, Ada's family decided to search one particularly difficult area again, a swampy beaver pond several hundred yards from the cabin. Using a canoe, they began draining some of the water. As the water level dropped, something heartbreaking came into view. Ada's body was found submerged in about 3 feet of water, in the flooded pond not far from where she disappeared. Authorities later confirmed her identity through identifying marks, including scars and a tattoo. Investigators stated that no evidence of foul play was found, though the strange circumstances surrounding that night, including the frantic phone call and the bizarre scene inside the cabin, continue to leave many questions. How did she end up in the swamp so close to the cabin? And what really happened during those final moments inside the house that night? A group was visiting Bluff City Cemetery during a tour, standing at the entrance of an active mausoleum while taking photos of the area. The location is known for its connection to a nightmare on Elm Street 5. At the time, nothing seemed unusual, but later, while reviewing one of the photos, someone noticed something in the background. Near a tree, a white figure, standing at a distance, almost as if it was watching the group. No one remembered seeing anyone there, which raises the question, who or what was standing by that tree, and how did no one notice it? For more scary cabin encounters, watch this next video.